Welcome to The Explainer. Every single deal you make, whether it's grabbing a coffee or signing a huge business contract, it all boils down to two key things, an offer and an acceptance. But what if a shop messes up a price tag? Or what if you accidentally accept an offer you didn't even know was on the table? Today, we're going to dig into the powerful and honestly pretty surprising legal rules that turn simple promises into rock-solid agreements. All right, let's jump right in with a situation we've all been in. You walk into a store, you see something you want, and it's got a price on it. So here's the question. Is that shop legally forced to sell it to you at that price? Is that little tag a binding legal offer? Well, the answer all comes down to the very first spark of any contract, the offer. And as you're about to see what looks like a straightforward offer when you're browsing the aisles, well, it's not always what it seems in the eyes of the law. So, what even is an offer? According to Section 2A of the Indian Contract Act, it's a really clear signal. It's basically one person saying to another, hey, I'm ready to make this specific deal right now. All I need is for you to say yes. It's got to be a definite promise, made with the full intention of being locked in if the other person agrees. And here is the big twist. That price tag? It's not an offer. Legally, it's called an invitation to treat. Think of it this way. The shop isn't offering to sell the item to you. It's inviting you to walk up to the counter and make an offer to buy it. The roles are reversed. This whole idea was really cemented in this fascinating case, Pharmaceutical Society versus Boots Cash Chemists. See, in a self-service pharmacy, the court said the actual sale had to happen at the register, where a pharmacist could supervise. If just picking an item off the shelf counted as accepting an offer, the contract would form right there in the aisle, which was against the law. But it also has a really practical side. This rule protects shops from, say, having to sell an item that was accidentally mispriced, or from selling something to a person who isn't legally allowed to buy it. You make the offer at the counter, and the shop gets the final say. Okay, so this invitation to treat is a world away from something called a general offer. A general offer isn't just an invitation to talk, it's a flat-out promise made to everybody, to the world at large, and anyone can accept it just by doing what the offer asks. Let's look at probably the most famous example ever. You've gotta love this one. The Carbolic Smokeball Company put out an ad with this wild promise. They were so confident, they even put 1,000 pounds in a bank account just to prove they were serious. Well, a woman named Mrs. Carlyle bought the smoke ball, used it exactly like they said, and she still got the flu. So she sued them, and she won. The court ruled that the ad wasn't just marketing hype, it was a serious offer to the public, and by using the ball as directed, she had accepted it. So we've seen an offer can be made to the whole world. But what if you do what the offer asks for, but you had no idea the offer was even out there? This brings us to a really fundamental rule of acceptance. You can't accept an offer you don't know about. The Indian case of Lalman Shukla versus Gauri Dutt nails this point perfectly. As you can see, a servant was sent to go find a missing child. Now, after the servant had already left, a reward for finding the child was announced. The servant, who knew nothing about this reward, found the boy and brought him home. The court said he couldn't claim the money. Why? Because for a contract to exist, there has to be a meeting of the minds. You just can't agree to a deal that you have no idea exists. All right, so we've got a valid offer on the table, and the other person is aware of it. Now we get to the response. How you say yes is everything, and it can either lock in the deal or completely blow it up. Here's the most important thing to remember. Your acceptance has to be a perfect mirror image of the offer. The second you reply with, yes, I accept, but I want to change this one little thing, you haven't accepted anything. In fact, you've just rejected the original offer and made a brand new one. That's a counteroffer. The textbook case for this is Hyde versus Wrench, and the timeline here shows it all. First, Wrench offers to sell his farm for 1,000 pounds, but Hyde responds with a counteroffer of 950. And that moment right there, that's the kill shot. It destroys the original offer. It's gone. So when Wrench says no to the 950, and Hyde comes back and says, okay, fine, I'll take the original 1,000, the court said, too late. That offer was off the table for good. There was nothing left to accept. Okay, but what if nobody actually says the words I accept, but they both just start acting like a deal has been made? Can your actions alone create a contract? Well, the law says absolutely yes. Take the case of Brogden versus Metropolitan Railway. A draft contract to supply coal was drawn up, but it was never officially signed. But then both sides just started doing what the contract said anyway. Brogden delivered the coal, the railway paid for it. When a disagreement came up later, the court said, of course there's a contract, their actions proved it.
And this idea is written right into Section 8 of the Indian Contract Act. If you perform the conditions of a proposal, you've accepted.
All right, now this is where things can get a little tricky. You've got offers and acceptances flying back and forth, maybe over long distances. When exactly, at what precise moment is the deal officially sealed? Timing, as they say, is everything. Back when mail was delivered by horse, this was a massive headache. Let's walk through the timeline in this landmark case, Adams versus Lindsell. On September 2nd, an offer to sell wool is put in the mail. It gets delayed and only arrives on the 5th. The buyer immediately writes back yes and posts their acceptance. But look, on the 8th, the seller, who hasn't heard anything, gives up and sells the wool to another buyer. And then, the very next day, the original acceptance letter finally shows up. So, who gets the wool? So, take a look at that timeline. What do you think? Was the deal done and dusted on the 5th, the moment the acceptance letter was mailed? Or not until the 9th, when it was actually in the seller's hands? And the answer, which might surprise you, is September 5th. This case created the famous postal rule, which is also reflected in Section 4 of the Indian Contract Act. It says that when you're dealing by mail, the acceptance is complete and the contract is formed the very moment the letter is dropped in the mailbox, not when it's received. But, and this is a really big but, the postal rule is a product of its time. It only works for non-instant communication, like snail mail. What about today? With email, phone calls, instant messages? Well, for those, the rule is the complete opposite. A case called N. Torres versus Miles Far East Corp. Established that for instant communications, the contract is only formed when the acceptance is actually received. The responsibility is on the sender to make sure their message gets through.
Okay, so a deal is on the verge of being sealed. Is there a last-minute escape hatch? Can you take back your offer before it's too late? This brings us to the rules of revocation.
The rules for taking back an offer are laid out in Sections 5 and 6 of the Indian Contract Act, and they're pretty logical. You can revoke your offer anytime before the other person's acceptance is complete. But, and this is critical, your revocation has to be communicated to them. You can't just change your mind and keep it to yourself. And this is where that old postal rule comes back into play. The very second that letter of acceptance is posted, your window to revoke slams shut. It's officially too late.
So from a flu remedy in the 1800s to the way we shop in a modern pharmacy, these really old cases have built the entire framework for every single agreement we make today. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. And what do they all have in common? It's all about ensuring fairness and creating certainty. These rules exist to make sure that a contract is only born when there's a real, communicated, and timely agreement from both sides, that true meeting of the minds. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Next time you're shopping online and you click that add to cart or buy now button, just think back to that Boots Cash Chemist's case. Are you the one accepting an offer from the website, or are you the one making the offer?